the road. Welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends. Welp as much as it drives Fuzzybutts all over this big old world of ours. Absolutely crazy when they hear me say it. I am the host of this show, your big dog, Luke Robinson, back again with you this week. And we're happy to back again with us this week. Ginger Morgan, she's our co-host, our co-producer, and she's also the executive director of the Puppy Up Foundation. Ginger, how are you? Welcome back. We didn't have you last week. We missed you. Welcome back.
I'm glad that you missed me. It's good to be missed sometimes.
Well, actually,
and I know that as much as you hate it, for me to talk about the weather, but it is so nice to have some cooler weather here in the Mid-South. We were dying in August, loving September.
Yes. Well, I have long-haired mountain kids, mountain dogs. So yes, cooler weather is always most welcome. But Ginger, I was gonna say something funny, but you shut me down, and so now I gotta get back to it. But I gotta be honest, to tell you the truth, Mark Kelly and I did not miss you at all. We had a wonderful interview. Mark and I, we went long. I think we did an hour and a half, 90 minutes. We totally nerded out on art and NFTs and AI, and it's inspired me.
Glad I missed it.
Yeah, you would have been sleeping on that one. So he did have two Yorkies, and I think they got maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds of airtime as two Yorkies. But I got to tell you, though, Ginger, and why I'm going on about this a little long, is it's inspired me, and so stay tuned. It's inspired me to do another podcast. I'm going to launch another podcast, and it's going to be entirely about art, AI, and the apocalypse. Because one of my one of the things that I spend probably too much of my bandwidth on is just trying to forecast and understand the future of AI's coexistence with humanity, let's say. And so, as you know, I'm also an artist and collector now, NFT artist and collector now. And so I want to use that, obviously, to fund cancer research and the foundation. So you should support it. You should be proud of me. And more importantly,
I'm sure you have another co-host in mind, but mentioning AI, I just printed out some stuff on hemangiosarcoma. And at the end of it, it says, this was just remember, I'm AI. Ask your veterinarian for any specific questions.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Right. All right. So we usually don't go on and on this long in the intro. So my apologies to our guests, but stay tuned about this podcast. I'm very excited about it. And also, Ginger will give me another platform to yap on. And so I'm sure that'll make you very happy. All right. So we've got really an exciting guest this episode, Ginger, because as you know, Indiana, he turned 12 this year, and he's having some mobility issues in his hind legs. We have some unknown yet inflammatory issue going on because he responds very well to NSAIDs. And recently, you gave us a product that, Indiana responded just tremendously to. And I hear that also that the company, our guest, his company is also supported the walk. You can talk about that. But I got to tell you, it's the product. I can honestly, personally attest to the potency of it, and I know a little bit about it, as you know personally. So it's Alex Kozushin. I hope I got that right, Alex. I did a little bit of a warm up prior to the show, as you know, but I often get that screw things up, as Ginger knows. With Genie's Therapeutics, got a wonderful CBD product out. It's a CBD type oil. Alex, welcome to Fuzzybutts and Friends.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And as I was mentioning earlier, the work that Puppy Up does and the Fuzzybutt podcasts are so important, really, to our industry, to dogs. And I really want to thank you for the important work that you guys do.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And
yes.
Thank you so much for donating some of the CBD oils to our upcoming walks in Memphis, Little Rock, and Lake Norman. We're using them well. I will say that I wanted to try out the product. So I got one of those for Indiana. The full disclosure there, I stole one for him just to see how it works, and he responds to it really well.
Oops, I thought you, Ginger, I thought you told me that Genie's Therapeutics donated one specifically for Indiana, or did I guess I got that wrong. My apologies.
They donated, and I assigned one to Indiana.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's the real story is coming out. Well, Alex, consider we're going to talk about use cases. You have some wonderful success stories on your website. I spent some time on your website too, Alex, and we'll get to those. But please consider Indiana's success case. I don't know. We can maybe put a write up on your website and include his picture as well. So thank you for it, even though we got the real story. So Alex, the way we like to start our show, since it is Fuzzybutts and Friends, we like it to start it with Fuzzybutts. So do you have Fuzzybutts of your own? And if so, tell us all about them.
Oh, I do. Since we had Genie and Trooper, which were two twin Airedales, and that's all I've had my whole life. I've had big dogs. But now we have little Leo, who's a rescue. He is a COVID rescue puppy. And he's 12.5 pounds of fury and love and joy. And, I want to see if I'll bring him in there and show you a little bit later when he gets in the mood. But yeah, we can't be without a dog in our family. My wife and I, we don't have kids. Our dogs are our kids, and they just bring such joy and pleasure and healing to our lives that I can't imagine our lives without a dog.
So Genie actually is the dog and is the inspiration and the story behind your company and your product. So please tell us that, since it ties into your origin story, which was the next thing I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. We started in 2018, at least our research started, the early parts of Genie's Therapeutics. And what it was is Genie, Airedale Terrier, about 80 pounds, 7.5 years old. He was diagnosed with a fast-growing sarcoma in his nasal passages. So the way it kind of happened is, first we had a tumor was growing out of his nose, and we could physically see it. Took it to the veterinarian, and they operated and they removed it. Then they said, actually, the first test came back benign. And then within 2 weeks, it grew back twice as fast. And at this point, there was a lot more concern. We went back and had another surgical procedure. This time, they removed as much as possible, but there were still margins of sarcoma left in his nose. And they basically gave us two options. They said, if you do nothing, you have 3 to 4 months, and it's not going to be a great way to go at all. That tumor is going to grow in his nose. It's going to become hard to breathe, backward sneezing, which dogs have, and it was just a terrible situation. And then the other alternative was radiation. And radiation was with something that we had to do 21 days in a row. We couldn't make an appointment. We had to show up at the radiation clinic and wait all day till it was our turn. And it was still going to be extremely expensive, upwards of $25,000, depending on the treatment we got. And all it was going to do was extend his prognosis by about 3 months, 3 extra months. Now you have, as you know better than I do, Luke, is that dogs have a much more difficult response to radiation as opposed to chemotherapy, which is the opposite of humans. So we didn't really, neither one of those options were acceptable to us. They were both going to end up in a very difficult end of life situation. And we love Genie so much. We just couldn't bear to think that that was the only option available. So we did our research. And when we came up with research, my wife and I had a little bit of experience in medical cannabis background. And we did our research, and we found this guy in Canada who was the originator. His name was Rick Simpson. And Rick Simpson actually he actually was the first one who gave away his cannabis oil to people with cancer. And the results were unbelievable. He got in trouble and he had to move out of the country because he was before his time. But the results were unbelievable. And he started with his own cancer. But what people don't realize is at the same time, his dog had cancer and he gave the treatment to his dog. And his dog went in remission and lived just like Rick did. They're still alive today. Not Rick's dog, unfortunately, he passed because that was some time ago, but Rick Simpson. So from there, we took his basic formulation and we made our formulation. And we gave it to Genie. And we made a topical solution, and we also made an oral solution. And 3 months later, he was declared in full remission by our veterinarians. And we did
Wow.
no other treatment. That was it. And we, of course, we can't claim that that was the solution. We don't have the research to back it up, although we do know that cannabinoids can kill cancer cells. But we didn't have that. We didn't have that research. But it was unbelievable. Genie went on to live 2.5 more years.
Wow.
A beautiful life, cancer-free. And when we took the Genie back to the veterinarian, our veterinarian said, you know, I've heard some anecdotal stories of cannabinoids working, of CBD working, but this is the first time I've seen an actual formulation, an organized formulation. And you guys have an obligation to do something about it.
Right.
And
Well,
that's
there's a lot. Hold on a second, Alex. You got my brain can only process so much so fast, and then I'll just shut down and I'll just go to sleep like Ginger does through most of the show. So we
I
can't.
most certainly do not.
No, I'm teasing. I tease, but there's a lot to this. First of all, brother, let me tell you, I feel for you. I lost my second dog, Murphy, to nasal adenocarcinoma, so I feel for you and Genie. But cheers to 2.5 years post-diagnosis. That's a great outcome. And I wanted to speak to that just a second because there's a lot going on there. Because I know pet parents. I've met thousands of pet parents on my travels, and it doesn't really matter. I think even to a certain extent, even if pet parents do what they're told is the top tier medical treatment, right? Gold standard. There's a new term for it. They call it now. I don't know why they're changing terminology and veterinary oncology or vet business, but they are for some reason. Anyway, so what we used to call the gold standard treatment, right? The top tier, and they still get different outcomes, and there's always guilt. So pet parents, just when they go through like this, I'm sure, as you know, there's just guilt. I could have done this. I could have done that. I could have done, oh, I did that wrong. I know. I feel guilt every single day for my three Fuzzybutts, my 3 kids that I've lost from cancer, for all the mistakes that I made, for things that weren't available, things I could have done or could have seen. But having my own kid with nasal cancer, I did everything, what was the best of the best. And first of all, when I did IMRT, which was the slow dose radiation over basically 4 weeks, not only did it not work and slow the initial nasal adenocarcinoma down, it created a secondary sarcoma. So it gave him cancer, which is sometimes what radiation can do because of the nature of radiation. And we don't know 100% that it came from radiation or it just metastasized and something weird happened. Cancer's weird, as you know. So with Murphy, and then I tried, like, what I think is just idiotic now and reflection, tried to do chemo on top of that. We did another dose of radiation after that because the sarcoma was on his nasopharynx, and his days were numbered at that rate because the inflammation was so bad in that area. And then, as you know, I was worried about radiation burning a hole in the roof of his mouth. That was one of the side effects that just terrified me. I can't tell you how many sleepless nights I had that he was going to have that. We were going to have to deal with an infection. It would just complicate everything. It was going to be a huge, huge mess. And so after failure of the first IMRT, I did the second SRT, which is a very powerful 3-day, just massive rads over 3 days. And anyway, just to summarize a long story and ultimately tragic story, I did basically exhausted all efforts, and we didn't get even a year of what I would say good quality of life. And then in Arkansas, we have a wonderful group of puppy people in Arkansas, and went out there and met a wonderful woman, a pet parent that had, I think her kid's name was Marley. I thought it was Murphy, but I think maybe she has another kid named Murphy. But there's definitely a tie into my Fuzzybutts. And so one of her kids had nasal cancer, and she did absolutely nothing at all whatsoever except treat it. At once, of course, it breached and it became kind of a mess, right? It became a mess to manage physically. She just treated her palliatively, and I think it was over 4 years of good quality life with her. So I guess the lesson, the very long lesson, my apologies, Ginger and Alex, I didn't mean to go this long, but it's a very important lesson, is that I've been around the block to know that you're going to feel guilt no matter what as a pet parent. You could have done this, you could have done that, because of financial constraints, you couldn't afford the gold standard. But even if you could, like I have, you're not guaranteed results. You're not guaranteed the gold standard outcome. So pet parents, you're going through something, it's a nightmare. Like Alex, for whatever reason, he had to, I love it. Now your story is even more beautiful to me, Alex, because like you, it inspired you to come up with an alternate solution, and you got a wonderful outcome from that. So that's the best. That's the best that any pet parent can hope for. So it's a wonderful story. But let's start with, we got a lot to talk about now, because I want to know about the magic. First of all, I know Rick Simpson makes an oil, Rick Simpson made that patent available, and anytime you go into any dispensary, you can actually acquire Rick Simpson oil. But I didn't know that its effectiveness was with cancer. It was so effective with cancer. Is that true? Have there been studies done with the Rick Simpson oil?
So, yeah, unfortunately, Rick Simpson isn't getting any money paid for that,
Wow.
for that label. Very disappointing. But yeah, there hasn't been any really direct scientific research with his oil. He started specifically for cancer, and he basically made the oil in his kitchen. And there was different variables, so he never really tested it, because he was really before the time when legalization and regulation came out. So so while there hasn't been any specific testing on his oil, and the way he made his oil, it was slightly different all the time.
Yeah. I know that. I know I shouldn't have jumped the gun there, though, and because it's on the list. But as you know, unfortunately, one of the hurdles of adoption in our Western medicine society is scientific studies. And also, as you know, not only they're expensive, but they're not always 100% reliable. It just costs a bunch of money. It's a tremendous barrier of entry, and it has been for cannabis as a medicinal plant. I'm a huge cannabis fan. I've seen its medicinal qualities. I'm a consumer personally for a number of reasons, health reasons, and I've lost 3 dogs to cancer, and 2 of them have received cannabis-based products, and now Indiana's obviously receiving your hemp-based products. So I'm a big proponent of it. We actually had a veterinary two veterinarians, Ginger. I think I recall.
Right.
There's a cannabis consulting practice out in Colorado. Are you familiar with those guys?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think they do is it Casar Andre? Is that Dr. Andre?
Yeah,
Is that
that's
who you're
right.
from?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, she's excellent.
Love it. So whatever we can do to help with the adoption of CBD and cannabis, hemp, and whatever the name is being called and whatever variety, I'm happy to help out. So I'll start out by saying I'm a big supporter of what you're doing, and I want to help out. So we can talk offline to whatever extent on that. So let's make this a mutual partnership in that respect.
Thank you.
So we got a lot to talk about, Alex. Let's start talking about the cannabis, the science of the plant, and where the cannabanoids and the endocannabinoid. Let's just talk about the science. Let's talk about the plant itself, cannabis, what we know about it, and where and how CBD comes from it.
Sure. So I think often people hear cannabis and then they hear hemp and they assume it's 2 different things. Actually, it's the same plant. The only difference is the THC content, which is actually the intoxicating component in cannabis. Hemp has a certain percentage, 0.3% or less, which makes it legal in the US thanks to the 2018 Farm Bill. And that is the regulatory distinction. It's really the same plant. And that's the only difference.
Good. All right. Well, let's talk about CBD, the cannabanoid. Is a cannabanoid, because most people don't know. They just think that there's a lot of myths involving cannabis and the science and the plant and the chemistry behind it and cannabinoids. So let's start with cannabinoids. What's the difference between THC, CBD? What's the distinction between those?
Sure. Just a real quick distinction. So cannabinoids are something that are synthetically made. Endocannabinoids is something that our body produces internally. and phytocannabinoids come from the plant, come from the cannabis and hemp plant. So just a quick little distinction there. But so far, we've discovered over 300 different components in the hemp and cannabis plant, different cannabinoids. We're discovering more all the time. We're really just beginning at the tip of the iceberg of the research that we really need to do on cannabinoids. But there's, like I mentioned, there's over 300 cannabinoids that we know. Terpenes also another component in cannabis and hemp, which is the smell that you get, which is also medicinal. So there is this effect called the entourage effect. Mm-hmm. So while we can talk about all those different individual cannabinoids, and the main ones being THC and CBD, the reality is there's an entourage effect in hemp and cannabis plants that creates the ultimate medicinal effect. We're barely understanding how the individual cannabinoids work, let alone when you combine them, how they affect each other and how they work together. Again, we generally have a difficult time outsmarting Mother Nature, and this is the case as well. So that's why we particularly use phytocannabinoids rather than synthetic cannabinoids, and often we see a better medicinal response with phytocannabinoids than synthetic cannabinoids, although we do have synthetic cannabinoids that are approved by the FDA and are actual pharmaceutical treatments.
Yeah, the cannabis plant is truly a magical plant. I think it's one of those plants that was put here for us to coexist and use for so many applications to benefit society in so many different ways, and it just hasn't been done to date. And we could go at all the reasons why, but we just don't have time, and it's a distraction anyway. But it's a magical plant, and I like what you said and how you described it. I've never heard it in those terms, those specific terms before. The entourage effect, because it's true. What most people don't understand is it's not like you can somehow separate all the phytocannabinoids out and then consume somehow individually. I think in terms of if you smoke it or that's how you consume it or use it or whatever, then you think about activation temperatures. That's also true of if you're making it bioavailable as orally as a gummy, or however you make it bioavailable as a pill, because cannabis THC does come in pill form as well. But its potency is not nearly as efficacious as if it's absorbed in other ways. But but I like but when you think about that, it's like the THC-A, THC-B are activated at a certain temperature. CBD is activated at a higher temperature. So you're going to get, like you said, that entourage effect. And that entourage effect, the entirety of that effect is what is the medicinal effect, right? Is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And we so far away to being able to understand that entourage effect that it's just best to trust Mother Nature and use her combination, and rather than trying to individually figure out, we need to continue the research. It's vital research. There's not just on dogs, but on humans. The potential therapeutic and medicinal effects are really endless.
I'd love to go to the FDA. I can't remember what the director's name is. The current director is like, well, we just need to trust Mother Nature. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
Because but I'm that way. It's so strange because we've had shows about diet nutrition, and for me, it's always been Mother Nature wins. She's the final arbiter of any discussion when we talk about dog nutrition. Right? Nature made dogs. I didn't. It doesn't really matter what I say or I think. I could have a ton of opinions on it. But what's the ancestral diet? How do we understand what was intended? And the same is true, like you said, there are medicinal, there are dietary plants, there are therapeutic plants, and at the end of the day, it's Mother Nature. But unfortunately, in Western medicine, as you know, what Eastern medicine has been doing for thousands of years, for what you've been saying is, we may not be able to show the mechanism of action on paper, right? Or we can have a trial enough, big enough or large enough to prove, or for whatever reason, it doesn't go through the regulatory process. It's still, and yet it still works, right? It still works. We know it works. And so that's the final arbiter of anything. But unfortunately, as you know, that's not how our Western regulatory process works.
Yeah, and you said it. It works. And not only does it work, when you remove the intoxicating THC out of the equation, there are almost no side effects. So generally, any side effects usually come from the carrier oil and just some GI issues, like any other oil would bring to a human or a dog adjusting to it.
Right.
But that's the thing; it works, and there are no side effects, unlike much Western medicine, including NSAIDs, which are vital, important to dogs, but they can destroy a dog's and a human's liver, kidneys. So those are
GI tract. Yeah, GI tract. Yeah.
yeah.
And also in humans, I mean, in elderly geriatric patients, NSAIDs are the number one reason why they get admitted to the ER is NSAIDs, and so why are we on NSAIDs when we know that cannabinoids in the endocannabinoid system does a number of things. We know it increases appetite, it stimulates appetite. We know that, and also improves it just improves nutritional input. And so, for me, when I think about what the resistance has always been about cannabis, has it truly been studies? I can't help but think it's just always been no way to monetize it, right? There's just been no clear way to monetize it. Now that there is, we realize there are all these different delivery distribution systems, devices. We can now vape it, we can now smoke it, we can now ingest it in gummies, we can put it in anything. They're putting it in actually, condiments now. You can get it in honey, right? So they're putting the problem with that, I think, though, knowing as little and as much about science as I do, the problem is that if you put CBD and cannabis and everything, is there going to be an ultimate tolerance issue? Are we going to become hyper tolerant or something? But it's just it's a marvelous thing, the endocannabinoid system that the plant plays into. So CBD, though, I'm curious though about the Rick Simpson extraction of CBD. So I walk us through exactly the extraction process, because I know that there are a couple of different ways that you can extract the actual chemical, except that the phytocannabinoid itself from the plant, the leaves. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Okay, so every time you say phytocannabinoids, I hear Fido, as in dog, like Fido. For the dog. Every time you guys hear that?
PHYTO, it's the Latin for plant.
Yeah, no, I get that, but I hear Fido since we're talking about dogs.
Yeah.
Just wanted to interject that.
Thank you. I think our audience knows that you're the blonde in the show. That's what we I'm the brains and you're the beauty. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. You're gonna get some.
You're not the beauty. We all know that.
No, hell no. We all know that. That's for sure. I'm just the old big dog. I used to be a handsome big dog. Now I'm just an old big dog. So, all right, back to the relevant part. Please, about the relevant part of the episode. Where did we leave? Extraction. So please, let's go through the extraction process of how you get the actual oil and then the compound, because to me that's so important, because that speaks to the purity of it. Because as you know, with nicotine is the same thing. Nicotine has health benefits. Nicotine is a naturally occurring phytochemical from the nicotine plant, and it has benefits, and yet look what corporate America has done to it, not only through the extraction process, but adding all sorts of chemicals to do impact boosting, and a lot of those chemicals, as we know, are carcinogenic. So the very thing, the health benefits that we wanted from nicotine, now, boom, it's actually one of the most toxic, I wouldn't say chemical, the nicotine chemical compound's not toxic. So anyway, I'm sorry going on. So walk us through your extraction process, because I think the purity is very important.
Yeah. So Rick Simpson, cannabinoids homogeneously dissolve in lipids, fats. That's why you see them in carrier oils, and also in alcohol in the distillation process. So what Rick Simpson did was he distilled it. He basically he would wash the plant with alcohol, and he would put it in a bottle, and he would physically shake it. And then the result would be the alcohol would be remaining. He would then strain it, and then he would use the heat process, decarboxylation, to activate it. And then he would dissolve the alcohol like it does this distillation process, except he did it in his home. And then he would dissolve all the alcohol off. And basically you have this very, very, very concentrated cannabanoid extract left. And that's what he used. And then he did. Now we know how critical and vital dosing is, but from his perspective, he delivered that extract directly without any type of carrier oil or anything else to his dogs and himself and the people he worked with. But for nowadays, there's many other extraction methods we can use. This we're more scientific. We're in a laboratory.
Do you use presses though, or are you using presses, or using like a solution, a solvent?
So we do it two different ways, and again, there's the distillation and there's also CO2 extraction. Okay. So we do both. Okay. CO2 extraction is a way of making the extract so cold that you're able to extract it without chemicals. And you can make sure CO2 is obviously not dangerous to humans. It's in our air that we breathe, so it tends to have a very fluid and clean process. We use distillation, which is alcohol, and then removing the alcohol by heating. That's the way that we can remove it. That causes decarboxylation, and actually that removes some other cannabinoids when you heat it up that can be also important medicinally. So we're learning So we're learning all different ways. Extraction science is improving every day. There's several different ways to do it, and we're getting much more scientific and better in what we do.
It needs to be much more. I know it's not 100% scientific. I'm fascinated because it is still a relatively new craft, a relatively new trade. The trade of the process of extracting chemicals from this plant, because each chemical has a different phytochemical, has a different way, different means that it needs to be extracted properly from the actual plant that it lives in. And so I know that the extraction methods are evolving. But the more precise that we can be, the better, because I'm sure, as you know, they're going back to the myths of CBD and hemp and cannabis and pot, the devil's cabbage, or whatever all that they call it. You know, if there's this concern about the psychoactiveness in dogs, and to me, I've heard stories, but to me, those stories, they seem to be. I'm not really sure if I believe some of the stories that I hear out there, and that the concern is 100% warranted. I just don't believe that. But we do know that THC, however, is idiosyncratic. Though it can have idiosyncratic reactions in different individuals. So it would seem that trying to extract it to almost a pure CBD would be the most ideal. But even still, there's CBD, the cannabinoid. There's not just one, right? There are multiple different cannabinoids, right? It's very complex, the science.
Yeah, and it's very important again that we don't the more research we do, the more extraction methods we discover, we actually sometimes filter out some of those beautiful terpenes and flavonoids and that material that could be possible, the medicinal effect. Now we make it cleaner, it tastes better for humans, it looks cleaner when you are able to remove all those issues, but it's not necessarily more efficacious. So
well, let's stop right there, because I want to speak specifically to that point, because you're absolutely correct, and this is an important part of the science. Terpenes, right there, is that you don't want to wipe the terpenes out. You don't really want to, again, like you said, that there's so many different compounds and chemicals, natural medicinal chemicals and compounds in the plant. You really don't want to wipe anything out. You want to get as much of that much of that. What was the term that you used? I'm sorry, I'm looking at my notes and I'm
Entourage effect.
entourage effect. I can't even read my handwriting. Entourage. I love the HBO show. I can't believe I can't read Entourage. If you want as much of that, but I want to speak specifically to terpenes because that's very important because some people don't like the smell, the aroma of the cannabis plant, but that's almost always a function of the potency and the type of terpenes. So let's talk about terpenes and the value of terpenes and some of the medicinal. We know that terpenes, because we know that terpenes exist in food products with humans, and there's a medicinal basis that we know over those. So let's talk about terps.
Yeah, and actually there is research on terpenes, and people don't even realize it, but they use it on a daily basis often in their lives in essential oils. You
Right.
see essential oils are essentially terpenes, and you see them everywhere, different for medicinally, for therapeutically, for relaxation. There's a reason, because they have an effect on us, and they have an effect on all vertebrates. So I think that we can't forget the terpenes. We already there's lots of research on individual terpenes without getting into the weeds, and it's equally as an important component to the final formulation that gets.
Yeah, let's break that down right there, because I mean, those terpenes are in everything. Citrus, the rind on most citrus plants and fruit have terpenes. I think it's called limonene. I screw it up. I get the terpenes have weird, strange chemical names that I screw up all the time, so my apologies. But lavender, which we were talking about a second ago, is the reason for lavender. It's used so ubiquitously. Is the lavender plant has very strong terpenes that are medicinal, so it's aromatherapy. And as well, when you put the lavender oils on your skin, so terpenes are a critical function to the therapeutic and medicinal benefits of the cannabis plant, and you have to. So let's speak to that specifically. Do you, Alex? Do you guys at Genie's Therapeutics, do you say, hey, well, we found whether through research or conversation, we found that that dogs respond to, or companion animals respond to, I guess dogs, we'll keep it simple, dogs respond to these terpenes better than those? Are there there are terpenes available in Genie's Therapeutics, in your product, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And in our third-party testing, that we do a 5-panel testing for cannabanoid content, for adulterants, and also terpenes.
Right.
And part of that reason is we know through research, not just us, but there's lots of research out there exists, that isolates, for example, if you just take the CBD and you take it out, aren't nearly as effective or efficacious, again, without combining everything. So when you do create an isolate, when you do take just CBD out, you're literally removing every other aspect of that plant. Right. And all you have is that one component, which is important, vital, right, but you just have that one component by itself. So yeah, we do third-party testing. And Yeah, absolutely. And
I got it right the second time, Ginger. You see how it took me 2 times. I'm sorry.
No, we absolutely. So we don't cultivate ourselves, even though we have experience in cultivation. Right. Cultivation is a business on its own. It's very complicated. It's a process, and we use USD organic cultivators. But when we that actually grow the plant, that have experience in farming, we look at their research. We ensure that they're, again, the one certification that we can do, which is USD organic. And then we pick those cultivators based on those genetics, based on their genetic profiles. You said exactly right, Luke.
Right.
We look at those profiles and we have at least some understanding of what we want in there. And generally, the more in there, the better for us. Again, we don't know all those individual effects. So we
No,
want
but
as much as possible.
so we don't know. There has not been research done to date exactly what terpenes. I guess well, I know that because there really hasn't been done a ton of research on cannabis and companion animals anyway. I know that to be true anyway. So I'm guessing we just have general ideas of which terpenes would benefit. Man, I got to tell you, we need to follow up on this too as well because I'm keen on doing some research on more cannabis and CBD cannabis plant cannabanoid terpene research and dogs. So if that's something your company is interested in, we can talk to the consulting group out of Colorado. I know I can get together a couple other companies. We need to do some research, and because as you know, money is it's just a shitty economy anyway. My apologies. I've been suffering under it for so long now that I just say it's anything else would just be a lie. We're all suffering under it. And so money's really tight, and yet we still need to do this research. We need to get it out there because the more that we can get this product out there to pet parents, because it's wonderful. Genie's story is wonderful. If that's true, we need more case studies, use cases out there like that, which means we need Genie's Therapeutics in the hands of more pet parents. And the way to do that is to go through the regulatory, get the studies, and that's just going to require money. So we need more research. So if that's something that your company has an interest in, I know the Puppy Up Foundation and whatever, we can put together a consortium, a syndicate to put together a study. So it needs to be done to figure out, because it is good to know, at least not just anecdotally, but we know intuitively or instinctively. But it would be good to know specifically which terpenes, which of the little cannabinoids, which of the little molecules. And like you said, some of the molecules that we don't even know about it yet. We're still discovering all the different medicinal compounds that are in this beautiful cannabis plant, right? So it would be good to start knowing that, hey, dogs respond really well to linseed, but they don't respond well to this terpene, or this terpene can have a psychoactive effect. And so we need to select against this terpene. Because I think it is correct to say there are some terpenes that are known to either be responsible for or at least enhance the psychoactive effect. And when you have that, you have the pet parents whose dogs act a little bit weird and high-like or whatever, and then you have them complain, and that's when people complain. That's when it becomes an unfortunate thing, and it's gotten us where we're at. We need to get your product in the hands of more pet parents for sure.
Oh, well, thank you, Luke. I really appreciate that. I couldn't agree with you more. You mentioned something interesting earlier. You mentioned monetization. And the challenge with plant extracts is you can't patent formulations with plant extracts. So you don't see enough research in the cannabinoid sector because at the end of the day, it's very difficult for companies to monetize. So we are absolutely at Genies. We're absolutely driven by science. We always say we're equal parts love and science, and we'd absolutely be interested in being a part of any type of research. But that's why you see such limited research. That's such a challenge, because at the end of the day, that formulation which is tested or comes out can't be patented. Anyone can copy a formulation.
That in itself right there is why it's never gotten the market push that it's needed, is because big pharma can't capitalize on it. If they can't patent it because it's a phytochemical, then big pharma, and actually this has always been my fear, Alex, always been my fear. Just what big tobacco did to a beautiful plant that had medicinal benefits that the Native Americans were trying to show us, hey, there's something here. Nature, learn from nature, and so on and so forth. Big tobacco came in and started adding all these chemicals, and I would imagine tagging chemical compounds. But now that I'm thinking about it, the reason they did that is so they could patent it. Hey, I have this nicotine compound with this synthetic tag on it, right, that's been added to it, and that's when we get in trouble, right? We began to take what Mother Nature gave us naturally, and then we synthesize it, and we create it synthetically, and we alter it, and that's when it causes problems for us. So my concern has always been, Alex, is that I'm all for the adoption, the complete and total market adoption of cannabis and THC and CBD. But my concern is once it becomes big business, we know what big business does to can do. I can't say this altogether, can do to medicinal products, because unfortunately, our foundation, we live in the world of cancer drugs and cancer therapeutics, and we need those, badly, because I could criticize Western medicine all I want, but the truth is Western medicine does work in many, many cases, and there's a reason for it. Unfortunately, Western medicine refuses to work with Eastern medicine and has for a long time, and that's unfortunate. So I'm going long. I'm sorry about that. My point was, what can we do? Do you feel like, what are you working on? What initiatives are you working on to both federalize what is it? What are you doing to get the adoption of CBD products on a national level?
Yeah. So, you brought up an interesting point, Luke, and that's about synthetic cannabinoids. Synthetic cannabinoids can be patented because they're man-made. And because they can be, that's where the money potentially is in pharmaceutical product. And they're going to try to recreate those cannabinoids. Again, Mother Nature has already done that to an exceptional level, but there's no ability to patent it, no money in it for pharmaceuticals. They're not going to spend any time testing it, but they will spend time trying to create these isolate cannabinoids. So right now, there's no regulation really for hemp products that contain 0.3% THC or less.
Can you patent strains though? Can you patent strains though? Because that would be the way to do it, right? Because you can't. The problem is it's a genetics problem, right? Is that you create a certain strain, over time genetics will kick in. You're never going to get 97% THCA, 37% THC. You're never going to get that over and over in every successive line, right? So is it possible to just patent a strain, and that's the way they can monetize it? Alex, you could monetize it?
So it actually, every time you grow a particular strain, it might slightly change because that's how Mother Nature works. But you generally know what you're going to get out of that strain. So you can go ahead and IP a strain, but the reality is once it's extracted, you're going to see how that strain, what's in that strain, and that part cannot be patented. Yeah. And so you can IP a strain, you can actually IP a name, you can copyright it, you can trademark it, but at the end of the day, the science, the end results of cannabinoids, the terpenes, they're going to be right there spelled out, so they're easy to replicate. So so it's difficult monetization.
Well, you're not ever going to go the synthetic route though, right? You're always going to continue to go the natural route, correct?
Yeah, well, never say never about anything. Who knows what the future holds? But at the same time, we're nowhere near it. We're nowhere near it. Why? Mother Nature has created something that works so well, beautifully. Yeah. I'm focused on trying to get our product out there to dog owners, and at the same time, do more of this research to find out what the effects are, to find out which cannabinoids are intoxicating, what's not, what terpenes work. That's the important research, rather than trying to recreate, in my opinion, cannabinoids synthetically. So who knows what the future will bring as far as that? Science is a beautiful thing. I'm sure there'll be interesting things, but we have a perfect plant, essentially.
Well, it comes down to a function of building your brand, Genie's Therapeutics, in use cases, and just having pet parents that say, hey, this is legit, it works. I've had Genie's had just responded very favorably to a soft tissue sarcoma in her sinus area. That's an N of one in of itself. That's very important. Genie's story in of itself is so powerful and important that you communicate out there, is that you can go the non-radiation, non-chemo, which, as we both know, are cancer. Those are both cancer-causing therapeutics. They're both carcinogenic therapeutics, if you think about the irony of that. So let's talk now then, Alex, which I think is a really important and the most important way to wrap this up and talk about Genie's Therapeutics, and let's talk about some use cases. Let's talk about some of the wonderful success stories and of dogs I read on your website.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, what's interesting is every time we're a small company, we started small, we bootstrapped, we built up slowly, which I think is the right way. And we have a small team of 6 people that are passionate about what they do. And the interesting part is every single person that's associated with Genie's is associated because of the effect Genie's had on their dog. So, we have one of our salespeople, Eric, he and his wife, Nicole, they had a beautiful pit bull terrier. So when we started, basically when we created this formulation, we went on social media and we offered our formulation for free. And all we asked is that we document the process so we could create these stories, and we can also better our formulation and better our product. It went exceptionally well. We've met some great people, and Eric and Nicole, ironically, were the first ones that contacted us because I think he was Mr. Bo, 10 and a half years old, and he had stage 4 metastasized cancer. And she basically wrote to me and she goes, "Give me your strongest product." Of course, we only had one product. So gave it to her, and then Bo actually went into remission as well. And they've become friends, lifetime friends. And Eric, who is associate in the past, worked in IT sales, has decided to help us with Genies and bring it to other people.
Well, that's one of your patients, right? Ginger was just showing you one of your patients right there, one of your supporters.
I was trying to. Indiana was not being
Indiana
very
Jones, my kid. He's one of your patients. I think it's important at this point, very important at this point, to explain sort of the science behind CBD and why we're talking about it having anti-carcinogenic or therapeutic effects on cancer patients. And that's because of its anti-inflammatory process. We know the inflammatory process contributes greatly to cancer. And the more inflammation you have over time, specifically in a specific area, such as your lungs, because you're a smoker, you're going to develop cancer in your lungs. You have inflammation in your joints. Race dogs. What are the race dogs? I can't.
Greyhounds.
Thank you. Greyhounds and whippets. I was just thinking whippets, but greyhounds. We know that the incidence of bone cancer is so high in them because they constantly have the inflammatory process going on in their joints because they're the race dogs. So we know that there's the link between inflammation and cancer is so strong and it's so apparent. And we know that CBD is one of the most powerful anti-inflammatories out there. And so when people listen to this podcast, because I do know, Alex, and this is important, we do have legit veterinarians that listen to this podcast, if you can imagine that. And we also have veterinary oncologists that listen to this podcast as well. And I think it's important because we all represent a side of this discussion, even the ones where the science hasn't been proven out to the satisfactory extent of some of our good friends like Phil Bergman, who runs clinical trials with VCA. It would be great to get him and see if we could work together on a CBD trial via VCA. But he's a purist. He believes in clinical trials, as he should. But the reality is that even though we don't have the science of, say, piroxicam, we do know that piroxicam is an anti-inflammatory, and we know that veterinarians prescribe piroxicam for pet parents that can't afford traditional treatments that have to go the palliative route. They have to say it's only an anti-inflammatory, but they will tell you that it also has some anti-cancerous properties. It has been demonstrated to have some anti-cancerous properties. So if you believe in piroxicam and then anti-inflammatories that have legit gone through the FDA process and are being prescribed for anti-inflammatory and cancer patients, then it's not a very long logical leap for you to make that CBD, which is also a very powerful anti-inflammatory, would also be useful for cancer patients, right?
Yeah, and we actually do have research, lots of research that support that cannabinoids are anti-inflammatory. And you
Right.
said it, anti-inflammatory is actually it's a healing response our body has to some type of external or internal factors that are causing the problem. And that's why the cannabinoids work so well, because all vertebrates have what's called an endocannabinoid system, ECS, in their bodies. There's cannabinoid receptors all over your bodies, and they kind of work. For example, you have a phytocannabinoid and you have a receptor, and it kind of fits together beautifully, like a key into a lock. And the endocannabinoid system, the way the cannabinoids work, phytocannabinoids, endocannabinoids, is responsible for just about every single process in your body, from anxiety regulation, from anti-inflammatory effect, to digestive issues, to skin issues. I can go on and on and on.
Right.
Our endocannabinoid system is responsible for everything, the processes in our body. So that's why it works so effective. I think I understand why some of your veterinary listeners and your veterinarians and your RVTs demand research. But I think that if you look into cannabinoid research, you'll see that the science is there. The science to push forward is there. Veterinarians have a bit of an issue right now. There's a regulatory issue. All over the country, there's all types of bills in state legislature. We testified in California about allowing veterinarians to discuss cannabinoids. Right now, they can't do it in most places in the country. They can't even discuss it. So for them,
correct.
They can't discuss it. They can't sell it. It's not, again, not able to be monetized. It's something difficult for them to do. But
it's so idiotic.
Yeah, it is. But every day they're asked. Yeah.
I had that when going through Hudson. I lost Hudson 2 years ago, almost a few weeks ago, was the second anniversary of his passing. And he had a massive inflammatory process going on. I mean, just massive. He had mast cell cancer, and veterinarians can't even speak to you about it. Can't even have a conversation with you about it. And that's medieval. That's medieval to me. That's like, oh, well, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I didn't know we're back in the dark ages where we had to not talk about things that could potentially help the health of your loved ones. I didn't know we were back there again. So
yeah, I asked one of my vets about it, and he said, I can't talk about it legally. I can't talk about it. And that was the end of the discussion.
It's stupid politicians passing stupid laws, protecting somebody's stupid interest. And it's absolutely unacceptable. My patients, as I get older and older, my patients, there's my handsome little baby. See, Ginger's showing, so I'll calm down. I get less and less tolerant of idiocy and moronic people that are driven entirely by self-interest. The older I get, so my patience is worse then, because it in this case it does theoretically cost lives, right? If you believe that CBD has anti-cancerous properties. Then if you believe that, and you believe that you've seen that, then if you don't make that available to pet parents, then you're costing pet parents time with their loved ones, and that's a problem with me. I have a problem with that.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. You're costing time, money, available resources, everything. And I think most veterinarians are beautiful people who do it for the love of a companion animals and working animals.
Definitely.
So and so every day they're asked about CBD cannabinoids, how they work. All veterinarians are, because it's out there.
No, I do. But see, we represent two sides of the extreme, though. You need guys like Phil and Craig Clifford out there. You need those guys to make sure that you don't have crazy people with completely crazy, unscientific snake oil type remedies and therapies. That there are those out there. There are a ton of. You type in dogs and cancer in Google, and you're going to get a ton of those fake cancer immune boosting drug scams out there. We know they exist, and so you have guys, the gatekeepers like Phil and Craig, that are out there doing their best to make sure that they're protecting pet parents from them. So please don't ever misunderstand that I don't 100%. Just had Phil on a couple episodes ago, so he'll totally appreciate that. But on the other hand, Phil needs guys like me and guys like you saying, hey, this is legit. We're seeing an N of 1. If you understand what that means, an N means sample, right? Sample population, right? So if you do a clinical trial, a study, An N of 100 means you have 100 dogs in that study. An N of 1, you only have one dog. Well, the way science says it, well, one, and if you give CBD to one dog and you see what it does, an N of 1 is not really medically relevant. That information, you can't scale that, right? And there's truth to that, but that doesn't disregard the validity, importance, and power of the information that you get from an N of 1. So an N of 100 is valuable, yes, but an N of 1 is also equally valuable. So we live in this very dynamic ecosystem where you've got Phil and Craig and doing their job, and you got pet parents that here on the ground in the trenches and seeing stuff that works. And that's how we work together. And so that's why we have Puppy Up, and that's why I would like to work with you on doing a study, because the other way to get that market advantage, since you can't patent it, if that's not possible, if we do get regulatory clearance, if we do put it through trials or whatever, just put it through trials, at least you can say you've been through trials. So there is an economic benefit. You can monetize scientific studies, is my point, right? You can monetize.
That's a brilliant point, actually, because one of the things that we can do, we can't use medical terms, like, for example, we can't use pain, so we use physical discomfort. We can't use anxiety, so we use stress. But once we do, and then once we do complete a study, let's say with Genie's formulation, with our signature blends formulation, and we see that there's a statistically significant benefit to inflammation, to osteoarthritis pain, to lowering anxiety levels, to increasing digestive activity. Then we can go and use those medical terms and say that Genies can support that. So there is absolutely a monetary benefit to completing these studies. And not only is it's a win-win. I love the science aspect. I geek out on it all the time. I wish I had more of a science background, but I'm very particularly interested in it because it's so important. And you're right, an N of 1 is usually considered anecdotal evidence, which is still important, but it's not really revered by the science community. So I understand that. And you're exactly right. An N of 1 is absolutely vital. And that's what gets us started and gets us moving in the right direction.
Yeah, just like Genie, like we started this out saying, Genie was an N of 1 that got you, incentivized you, and motivated you to come up with this wonderful product that you can see Indiana cruising around in the background. And I got to tell you, that means he's getting up on his own, and he has serious back mobility issues. He's having a very hard time getting up on his own, and he's done that 4 or 5 times. So this is a great promo for Genie's Therapeutic. It's like, it's like those revivals of church revivals where they have the kid in the wheelchair or on the crutches, and then the lay it on the hands and it gets up and starts dancing. It
almost seems too good to be true, but it's true. It works. It's true. And these things happen. I hear stories like this every day. This is why we do it. These type of stories. I mean, I've been blessed with the opportunity to be in several different industries in my professional career, and never in any industry have I ever been in where people are grateful to give you their money. At the same time, thank you for improving the quality of life for my family. You've generally made a difference. And it's such an incredible feeling. It's what keeps us going on those hard days. Building a company is not easy, but just knowing that the impact we make and the stories is just incredible. And you're right about the snake oil stuff. Everyone hears CBD, everything. So it's brought like this glut of companies who there is no regulation on the hemp side. So what someone says is on the bottle is not necessarily what's actually in the bottle. In fact, we see many, I don't know, there's been a lot of local news that have actually tested CBD products. And for example, they found that one that was done in Los Angeles, 9 out of the 10 CBD products had nothing like what they said on the package. So it's difficult. It's difficult for these parents to understand. It's difficult for veterinarians to be able to understand and be able to trust cannabinoids. Because
I absolutely agree with you, and I don't want to forget this point. Ginger, you can make this connection as well. I had a while back, I had the CEO of Hollywood Feed on His name is Sean
McGee.
McGee.
Sean McGee.
And I'm horrible with names, so don't stress me out about that, please. Sean McGee and he refuses to have CBD products and hemp-based products in his stores, and he has 160, 200, how many is that? He's hundreds, whatever.
He has over 200, but they're carrying
And
it
he's
now.
scaled up that from nothing in 10, 15 years. He's done that. So he's expanding aggressively. But we talked about that, and I agree with them because there's so many crooked companies out there. There's so many people, they're selling crap products out there, and there's no regulation at all. And you find them everywhere. You can find them at gas stations. You can find them right there in the impulse aisles and crap like that for, and people are traveling. Is your dog having pain? It's like, oh yeah, my kid's arthritis is acting up. I grab these CBD, and they test them and they realize, holy crap, there's zero anything in there. It's just sugar, right? And it's so I agree with Sean in the sense that there's so many bad actors out there selling so much crap product out there that I don't know what sort of regulatory agency that we could get or what we could do other than just say, hey, we know your product is legit and put you out front and center as a legit product. So I would love to have you talk with Sean maybe and have that conversation because you and I both know that CBD is legit. Pet parents need access to it. But Sean's concern is also equally legit, is that, he wants to do it, but just doesn't know what he can trust.
Yeah, these stores, they carry thousands of SKUs. It's hard for them to be experts in everything. So how do they figure it out? So that is absolutely the biggest factor. And actually it can potentially border on dangerous even, because these products can come from out of the country. They can have adulterants in them. Extraction methods can be very dangerous that they use.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we didn't even talk about that. The extraction, that's very important. Alcohol is one of those things you can burn off, but some companies use butane. They use these highly chemical, highly carcinogenic solvents to extract the chemical from the plant leaves, and those chemicals in themselves, as I said, are carcinogenic. That's why I was concerned and interested in your extraction method. So distillation and pressure and the CO2 are the main extraction methods. So you're right, and then you're right. Overseas, you can't trust any product overseas. So.
Yeah, and you're right. There's a lot of hydrocarbon extractions which are dangerous, and they don't remove all the hydrocarbons left, which creates a carcinogenic effect, which creates an inflammatory effect, which is ironic because you're trying to control the inflammation. So I understand. I've been after Sean for quite some time because I'm so passionate about this. I know the difference it makes, but I know they're hanging.
You've been after Sean?
So you know Sean?
I don't know him personally, but I've been going I've connected with him on LinkedIn. I've tried to tell him the story, and it's not even as much about genies as it is about cannabanoid products. You're right. They're very resistant, and I understand why. It's very difficult to blame him.
He just has to trust you. He's an old school businessman. He just needs somebody he can trust. So maybe that's the approach you should take, is find somebody who would be an expert that he would trust, a scientist that he would trust that's been doing this for a long time, that has a good CV and can speak. He's a businessman. You should listen to the episode. He's an old school businessman. He speaks simply. He speaks plainly. He understands. He just has a business mind. So he needs somebody that he could see as an expert that talks simply and plainly, doesn't, get drunk in the science and all that just says, hey, it's legit. Here's the stuff. Here's that. And here's what you look for. And I guess you just need a guide, right? You need a guide. And if you could help guide him through, navigate the muddy waters of the CBD market, that could certainly help. But yeah, Sean's a good guy. Maybe Ginger can help make that connection, but you know who he is.
I can always send Sean an email and let him know how well Indiana's doing on it.
Yeah,
that'd be amazing.
But if you do meet with them, two things. If you do meet with them, though, get the science guy. I don't know if you have a chief science officer or if you have somebody, but make sure he speaks plain English and just a business. Just talk science, plain simple. How it works, how it benefits, and then use cases. He really loves use cases. And as he should, that's how he bases his decision. If you have use cases to back it up, your product is legit, right? If you don't have use cases to back it up, how do I know your product is legit? So anyway, and if something comes to that, the Puppy Up Foundation gets 10%. All right.
Oh, more than happy. We're more than happy. If something doesn't even come up, we're happy to contribute.
We have to, because the unfortunate reality is not a lot of money, and the multi-billion-dollar pet industry goes to cancer research compared to oncology, and the sum that does from some of the big names, it doesn't really go anywhere that I think is acceptable, or I don't really see it being put into use. So I know this is going to be controversial, but I think some of it is just a bunch of BS. And big corporate pet company America is not stepping up, damn it. And I'm getting tired of it. I'm 15 years into this, and Ginger, I'm tired of it. Their companies are making billions and billions of dollars of pet parents every year. It's time for you to get serious about putting money into the #1 killer of companion animals, and that's cancer. My patience has kind of come to the end. So sorry about the little rant, but it's important to get that out there, because you're going to see Big Dog is just it's going to be a new year coming up. So the older I get, like I said, my tolerance, I push. You have to. The older you get, you got to push and push, and that's what it comes down to. So whatever we can do to help you push CBD through and get it out there that's more available to pet parents that have their kids suffering unnecessarily, we're happy to do, Alex.
Oh, thank you so much. And you're exactly right. It's so frustrating because these giant pharmaceutical companies have massive amounts of cash flow, massive amounts of money, assets. They could do charitable work. Even if something can't be monetized, they can still do work in order to move cancer treatments forward and more progressing. But the reality is, and the human side and the companion animal side, the money is not in healing or finding a solution to the problem. The money is in treatment, because that's ongoing. So I don't think that they necessarily want to find a cure for cancer, because that's not where their money is going to come from. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality.
That's a whole nother podcast, my brother. All right, Ginger. Well, before I go to Ginger, all right, Alex, we covered a lot. I think we got a lot, and that's it. But it's 100%, 100%. Look, I get it. I'm a business guy. I understand the economics. I get it. I understand all the angles of this very complex micro system that we have when it comes to drug development, discovery. And then you have disease manifestation, treatment. I got it. I got all that, and we all need to do a better job, is where I'm going. And you're right. Because my biggest concern, actually, look, been doing this for 15 years, man. Was when my first dog was diagnosed, 2004. Is that right? Yeah. No. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. 2004. Malcolm was diagnosed with bone cancer. Lost him in 2006. Started my first walk in 2008. And so I've been doing this for a long time. And when I started this, drug companies weren't developing novel therapeutics for cancer and companion animals, because it was an economic decision. And so I had to keep screaming at them. Keep screaming. There's a business. There's a business there. Come on, guys. There's enough. We don't, because they show us the numbers. We don't know exactly how many dogs get cancer every year, because there's no way to count that. There's no system out there to count that. There still isn't. But so we've had to go through that very, very, very arduous process of increasing adoption, right? Getting over that, crossing that chasm. And I think over the past 15 years that Ginger and I have been doing this, we've been doing this together for 15 years. We certainly have made significant advances in, I think, the public's awareness of cancer, not only cancer in companion animals, but also it is similar to cancer and disease. So it can happen. It just takes, it's Herculean effort, and we all have to do a better job, for sure. And that's drug companies. But drug companies now see it. There's money there. There's money in dogs and cancer. So now they see it. So now it's time for us to keep pushing, because we have a whole lot of dogs. We think the number is 6 million dogs diagnosed every year with cancer, which means that 6 million dogs out there that are in pain, that need CBD, right?
That's also 11 per minute.
Puppy Up gets 10% of that. All right, good. All right, that's the business plan. All right. Anything else you like? Okay, Alex, give us your website and your social media contact information for Genie's Therapeutics, please, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can contact me directly at alex@geniestherapeutics.com. Our general email is hello@geniestherapeutics.com. We're on Instagram where we have a fabulous social media person, Kate, who posts really informative articles, not just on cannabinoids, but on general dog health and companion health in general. We're on Facebook.
You on Twitter?
Not yet.
Once I get on Twitter, I'm trying to recreate Dogs of Twitter. It's now called X. And so I want you on X and get signed up because we need dog people and we need that. We need all social media platforms to be doing whatever they can to disseminate information for pet parents. And that includes Twitter. So we'd love to have you on there. So we'll tag you in social media. We'll hit you up. We'll include that and include your website in the show notes too.
So is it Genie's Therapeutics on Facebook and Instagram?
Yes, and geniestherapeutics.com is our website.
Okay.
We have the research, this has been such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. But we also, on our website, we have the specific scientific research that goes into our formulation, which is not just CBD. There's other cannabinoids in there for a reason. And you can look up the science and get into it.
Excellent. Well, thank you again for supporting the Puppy Up walks, and we'll talk offline about moving towards working on a study and getting the information out there to pet parents through the foundation. So, all right, guys, we reached this. We went a little long. I'm sorry about that. I always seem to go long.
Luke, you always go a little long.
Yeah, it's good content. I think, I just checked, Ginger.
When you think that I'm falling asleep is when you're asking your questions that go on for 2 minutes. I timed you.
Well, this happens to be a topic. This is a little bit different, though. This happens to be a topic I'm very, very informed about. I'm very knowledgeable about. So it's.
I will say I do wake up for the answers. It's just I fall asleep when I hear a different voice.
Well, we are growing now. We do have 50. I just checked. We have 53 subscribers on YouTube, and so we are growing. That's up. Yes, I think people will like the content. I think they like what we're doing with Fuzzybutts and Friends, and. We've reached the time of the show where we do our cancer tip of the week. Ginger, do you have that this week from ChatGPT? It seems like you cheated.
I get like 30 seconds and he gets an hour.
ChatGPT is notorious for getting things wrong. So do you even know?
No, I'm not.
Cancer information?
No, I just know I wanted to look up one thing, but just to make sure that I was correct. So I was going to talk about hemangiosarcoma because I was at the vet's office recently, and she actually reminded me about, a story about my dog Sadler. And so Sadler, how I knew something was wrong with Sadler is that he let me trim his toenails. I think he was maybe 12 years old. And his entire life, it has taken 3 members of a veterinary team and me to trim his nails. I think you took him once, Luke, as well. So when I thought about the fact that he just let me trim them, I mean, it took me like a minute to get all 4 feet. And so I thought about that for about a week, and then he made an appointment for him to go to the vet, and we did an ultrasound. He wound up having a tumor on his spleen, which I immediately thought was hemangiosarcoma because that's typically where that comes. And hemangiosarcomas are carried in the blood vessels. So it came back. We did the surgery, came back, and it was benign. And I was really, really happy about that. However, fast forward about 8-9 months later, his behavior changed again, and he was really aggressive towards my niece and her husband. And that was the first time they met Sadler, and unfortunately the last, but I think they didn't want to meet him again after the first one anyway. But, then after a series of tests, and we did the OncoK9 test with PetDX, and it came up that he did have cancer. So and unfortunately he passed away just a few months after that. But my tip is this, because we learned again that if I had known at the time, I probably should have asked for another pathology report on that benign outcome.
Yeah,
Or,
we talked about this. It's called a pathology review. We did it
right,
for,
ask for a pathology review on
but
that.
even so, go ahead, sorry.
Because then way back, kind of the same thing happened with Lily. She had a benign tumor on her spleen, and I didn't think anything about it. And a year later, she wound up having stomach cancer. So for me, now if I hear that anything is benign, it's like, well, don't trust it. So I guess my tip is if you get that benign pathology report back, have your dog checked out again. Go back to the vet within 4 or 6 months and have that all done again. I mean, you can't have the tumor removed again, but have a ultrasound done to make sure that they don't see anything abnormal on your dog.
Yeah, there's a lot there. There's a lot in that little tip, or that tip that you just gave there. And one is that cancer is not a static quantity, or even so sometimes the pathologist can be looking at precancerous cells. Sometimes they can be looking at tissue that's not even precancerous, that's going to become cancerous, and what they consider as benign. And sometimes they're looking at the tissue sample, because you're taking a piece of tissue from a mass, a tumor mass that's cancerous or non-cancerous, and you're just taking a piece of it, and you're making the assumption that that piece is 100% representative of the entire mass, right? Well, that's a very big assumption,
Right.
Right? Because that's not always the case, as we know. And so we know so your takeaway, several things, is that if you have a mass, if it's a mass that we're talking about, try to have the mass removed. Like with Indiana, we got 95% of that out of his throat. Now, the question I have is that the 5% that's left, is it ever going to become cancerous? So just, I guess the other takeaway, most takeaway, is that don't, and this is really something that I try to tell every pet parent, and they hate me for it, and I'm just going to have to accept that. If your veterinarian ever tells you your dog is cancer-free, don't believe him. Just sorry. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. And I see these damn pictures on Twitter and Facebook and all the time, Instagram. My dog is cancer-free. And I feel so tempted. And then if I'm really, I feel compelled to respond, because it's so important. Because if your dog goes through cancer, the likelihood of them getting a subsequent secondary cancer to a secondary tumor site is significantly increased in almost every case of cancer. So if you ever have a veterinarian or a veterinary oncologist that tells you your dog is cancer-free, I would get another one. So that's having the second set of eyes look at having the path review. So we just did a path review for Indiana because it seemed like scar tissue was an unusual explanation for the mass on his vocal cords. And it ended up being true because they changed it. It was a different type of tissue. So even the pathologist, but pathology is not like a clear-cut science, right? It's not like it's almost always a consensus of several people looking at the cells and trying to arrive at one singular conclusion. So it's a very complex process. And if you can go with the big path labs out there, VCA. What is VCA's path lab called, Ginger? Do you know? You need to have that next time. Anyway, we'll have that. There are 2 big path labs that constitute, I think, 80% of processing, 80% of tissue samples, and then a bunch of smaller ones do the rest. So
yeah, we went. Indiana's was sent, I believe, to UPenn, University of Pennsylvania.
That's right, and that's not VCA. The other one, so it's
right. But
right.
Dr. Bergman said that they did a really good job.
Correct.
Yeah. So
I didn't mean to imply that, but we still decided to go ahead and do the path review anyway, because it was an atypical response, and I think that should be your guide as a pet parent. But it's
even with Lily, she was on oral chemo for a year, and during that time she got ultrasounds like every 2 or 3 weeks. Now we do it every 4 to 5 months. Yeah. And there has been no change. Her cancer hasn't come back. Her cancer, small little, let's say, tumors are there, they have not grown. But that doesn't mean I don't still go back every 4 to 6 months to have her checked out.
Well,
And
that was my point. Is
knock on
that,
wood, she'll be 16 in November. So
yeah, knock on wood. That's wonderful. You have an atypical outcome with her because she had a couple of cancers. But that's kind of my point, is that as a pet parent, unfortunately, if you say your dog is cancer free, you breathe a sigh of relief and just say, "Oh, okay, well, I don't have to worry about anything going forward." And I think it gives you an unrealistic expectation.
exactly.
And the expectation when you get the first cancer diagnosis, you both as a human being and as a companion animal, you're the likelihood of you getting a secondary cancer is significantly increased. So, all right, we talked. Sorry, Alex, we ended. I don't mean to end such a great, informative podcast on such a dour note. My apologies, Alex. It's been great to have you on the show. Genie's Therapeutics, everyone. Indiana Jones, he recommends it. He's had 4 blockbuster movies out, and if Indiana Jones recommends Genie's Therapeutics, by God, you should go get it. So we should do a funny video because his name is Indiana Jones. We should put a hat on because Harrison Ford, he probably got beat up pretty good and needed some CBD.
He probably needed some too
on set. So we should do something clever, something really funny. So Alex, with Genie's Therapeutics, thank you for being on Fuzzybutts and Friends. And before you go, if you have any new products that you're looking to launch or anything exciting, some research, we'll talk offline and continue our conversation. But anything else you want to mention to pet parents in our audience, let us know. You're welcome back to Fuzzybutts and Friends at any time.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Luke and Ginger. I appreciate your time in this really important conversation. And I'll just say to pet parents, I understand that some people think that cannabinoids are snake oil, do everything. They're not. Please do your research, look into it. It could potentially save your dog's life. It potentially increase the quality of life, which is all about quality of life. So please don't give up. It's a really rough time for the cannabinoid industry while we filter out the bad actors, but please do your research. They work, and Genie's works. And thank you again, Luke and Ginger.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
Welcome.
All right,
Thank you.
everyone. Sorry we ran a little bit long, but we had a ton of things to cover and some great information as well. We'll see you next time. You can check out our podcasts on the platforms such as iHeartRadio and Spotify. Every Tuesday, we try to drop at midnight. Sometimes we run a little bit late. My apologies. That's all on me. My bad. But if you want to watch us, see us live and in person, you can check us out on our YouTube channel. It's at fuzzybutstudios.com. We'll see you next week. Puppy up. Talk soon. Bye, everybody.